The law of purification and the day of atonement in the wilderness. Beneath the shadow of Sinai, God spoke again to Moses and Aaron. His words were not casual. They were holy fire, burning with the same authority that shook the mountain. "Speak to the children of Israel," the Lord said, "and tell them, when any man is defiled, he is unclean before me." Thus began the law of ceremonial purification, a law that revealed the holiness of God and the frailty of man. A simple touch, a bed, a garment, a drop of blood, all could make a person unclean. Every bed he lay upon was unclean. Every vessel he touched had to be broken. Every person who drew near was defiled until the evening. It was a lesson written in flesh and water. That sign contaminates everything it touches. That impurity spreads, unseen but deadly, and that no man can draw near to the presence of the Holy One unless he is cleansed. The law commanded washing. The law demanded sacrifice. 7 days of waiting, then 2 doves offered, one for sin, one for burnt offering. And through the blood of atonement, the unclean was restored. Yet even in these shadows, a greater truth was hidden. For no water could wash the soul, no dove could cleanse the heart. The outward washing was only a symbol pointing forward to the fountain opened for sin and for uncleanness. The blood of Christ that speaks better things than the blood of bulls and goats. Then came the holiest day of all, the Day of Atonement. The high priest entered the sanctuary alone, trembling, robed in white linen, purified by blood. He carried incense before the mercy seat, and the smoke rose like a prayer before the Almighty. He took the blood of the bull, the blood of the goat, and sprinkled it upon the mercy seat 7 times to make atonement for himself, for the people, and for the sanctuary that their sins had defiled. 1 goat was slain, its blood poured out for their redemption. The other, the scapegoat, bore the sins of the nation. The priest laid his hands upon its head, confessing over it all their iniquities, and sent it away into the wilderness, carrying their guilt to a desolate land. It was a picture of what would come, a glimpse of Calvary in the language of ritual. For Christ, the great high priest, entered not into an earthly tabernacle made with hands, but into the very presence of God. He offered not the blood of animals, but his own blood, once for all, and obtained eternal redemption for those who believe. The Day of Atonement ended each year in solemn peace, but at the cross it ended forever in victory. For when the veil was torn in two, the way to God was opened. The shadow gave way to the substance. The ritual became reality. And the unclean found cleansing, not by water, but by the blood of the Lamb. So the call still stands, "Be holy, for I the Lord, am holy. Wash your hearts, not just your hands. For blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The sacred blood and the call to holiness. When God drew the line in the silence of the wilderness, beneath the shadow of Sinai, the voice of the Almighty broke through once more. It was not the sound of thunder or fire this time, but the solemn tone of divine order. Speak unto Aaron, and unto his sons, and unto all the children of Israel. Thus began a decree, unlike any before it, a law not merely of ritual, but of life and death. For in Leviticus 17 and 18, God drew the sacred line between the holy and the profane. Every sacrifice, every drop of blood belonged to him. No man was to slay in secret. No offering to be made apart from the tabernacle. Why? Because the blood is the life, and the life belongs to God. It was through that blood that atonement was made, a covering for sin, a bridge between the sinner and the Holy One. And just as the blood on Israel's altar cried out for purity, so too the blood of Christ, the true Lamb, would one day cry out for redemption. He alone would fulfill what Leviticus foreshadowed, that no soul can live unless it is reconciled to God through the blood of the covenant. But God's call did not end with sacrifice. Leviticus 18 opened the door to a deeper confrontation, not with the wilderness outside, but with the wilderness within. The Lord said, "After the doings of Egypt, wherein you dwelt, shall you not do, and after the doings of Canaan shall you not do." It was a warning, a dividing line between the world and his people. Canaan represented corruption, and in the midst of both stood Israel, called to holiness. Every commandment, every restriction, every prohibition against sexual immorality and idolatry was not merely moral law. It was covenant identity, a shield to preserve purity in a world drenched in perversion and false gods. God was not just setting rules, he was building a people, a holy nation through whom his glory would shine. Yet, centuries later, that same voice still calls to a generation that dines with idols, that profanes the sacred, that mocks holiness. The word of God still echoes, "Be the holy, for I am holy." Holiness is not a relic. It is not outdated. It is the mark of those who walk in covenant with the living God. When the world blurs every boundary, the Spirit of God restores them. When the culture glorifies impurity, the blood of Christ cleanses and consecrates. And when the world drinks deeply of corruption, the church must drink deeply of the blood that gives life. So, let the wilderness hear it again. There is no life without the blood. There is no covenant without holiness. And there is no fellowship with God without separation from the world. For the same God who spoke at Sinai still speaks today, and his voice still calls his people out of Egypt, away from Canaan, and into the holy fire of his presence. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. In the wilderness of Sinai, the voice of the Almighty thundered once more, "Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." It was not merely a command, it was a call to live as his chosen, to reflect his purity in a world stained with corruption. God spoke to Moses, and through him, to every soul that bore his covenant name. He unveiled the sacred pattern of holiness, not as distant perfection, but as the daily posture of those who walk with him. Honor your parents, keep the Sabbath, show kindness to the poor and the stranger. Do not steal, do not lie, do not profane the name of the Lord. Leave the corners of your field unharvested, so the hungry may eat. Holiness was not only found in the sanctuary, it was meant to breathe through every act of mercy, every word of truth, every honest trade and humble prayer. But woven through these commands was also a warning, a boundary drawn by divine fire. The Lord spoke against every dark practice of the nations around Israel, against child sacrifice, against mediums and spirits, against sexual immorality that defiled body and soul. Do not walk as they walk, said the Lord, for I have separated you to be mine. The message was clear. Holiness demands separation. To be God's people means to renounce the idols of Egypt and Canaan, the gods of self and pleasure, of deceit and pride. Every false altar must fall. Every secret sin must burn away in the light of his truth. And the Lord warned them, those who profane his holiness, those who sacrifice their children to Molech, who consult the spirits of the dead, or defile the sacred bond of marriage, they will bear their iniquity. Judgment was not cruelty, was mercy clothed in fire. It was the shield that guarded Israel from becoming like the nations doomed by their own corruption. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be holy, said the Lord. For I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples. This was not the holiness of outward ritual alone, but of heart, mind, and soul. A holiness that reflects the very nature of the Creator. A holiness fulfilled not by law alone, but by love. Love for God and love for neighbor. And though centuries have passed, the divine call still echoes through time. Be holy, for I am holy. It is the anthem of every soul redeemed by grace, every believer who bears the mark of the Spirit. For through Christ, the true and perfect Lamb, the law of holiness is no longer written on stone, but upon living hearts. He is the fulfillment of every offering, the purifier of every soul. In him, mercy and judgment meet. In him, the fire that once consumed sin now refines the believer. So hear it again, with trembling and with awe. The Lord your God is holy. Walk in his light. Live set apart. For the world may offer pleasure, but only God offers purity that endures forever. Imagine a world where time itself is not just counted by hours or days, but sanctified by the very hand of God. A rhythm set by the Creator, where certain days rise above all others, marked not by the whims of man, but by divine decree. In Leviticus chapter 23, we step into that sacred calendar, a divine orchestration of holy times, feasts, and convocations. Moments set apart for the glory of God, for the spiritual life of his people, and for their instruction in holiness. God speaks to Moses, saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts." These were no ordinary gatherings. They were holy convocations, solemn assemblies of worship, remembrance, and rejoicing. Here, God demonstrates that holiness is not merely about people, places, or objects, but also about time itself. Every hour, every day can be set apart, but only by God's appointment does it truly become sacred. First among these holy times is the weekly Sabbath day of rest, reflection, and communion with God. 6 days of labor, and then 1 day to withdraw from all worldly affairs. On this day, God calls his people to rest, not just physically, but spiritually, to step out of the relentless busyness of the world and into the embrace of divine peace. It is a day of holy convocation to gather, to pray, to read, to praise, and to dwell in his presence. And even if one could not gather publicly, the Sabbath was to be observed in every home, marking every dwelling as a sanctuary, a place where God's holiness touches daily life. But the rhythm does not end with the weekly Sabbath. God appointed festivals of remembrance, thanksgiving, and joy. The first is the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the 14th day of the first month, a lamb without blemish is offered, a memorial of deliverance, of God's mercy in sparing the firstborn of Israel in Egypt. 7 days follow, eating unleavened bread, reflecting on the humility and urgency of God's salvation. And then comes the wave offering, the first sheaf of the harvest, offered before the Lord, sanctifying the very fruits of their labor. This offering is not just for sustenance, it is a spiritual act, a declaration. All that I have is yours, Lord. I acknowledge your provision, your mercy, your sovereignty. 50 days later, the Feast of Pentecost, or Weeks, comes as the culmination of the harvest. Here, 2 loaves of leavened bread are offered, accompanied by 7 lambs, a bullock, and 2 rams as burnt offerings, and a kid for a sin offering. It is a festival of joy and gratitude, a celebration of God's abundance, but also a solemn reminder of dependence on Him. For without His blessing, the harvest is empty. It is a feast that calls the heart to charity, leaving the corners of the fields for the poor and the stranger, teaching that joy in God always flows outward to others. Then comes the 7th month, a time of awe and reflection. The Feast of Trumpets on the first day is marked by the blowing of the trumpet, a call to spiritual awakening. This is followed by the Day of Atonement on the 10th day, a solemn fast, a day to afflict the soul, to humbly confront sin, and to seek reconciliation with God. No work, no distraction, just total devotion. And 5 days later, the Feast of Tabernacles begins, a week-long celebration of dwelling in booths, recalling the wilderness sojourn, the fragility of life, and God's tender provision. This is a feast of rejoicing, of thanksgiving for the harvest, of remembrance for God's faithfulness, and, ultimately, a type of Christ dwelling among Usta, Word made flesh. All these appointed times, from weekly Sabbaths to the great annual feasts, were designed not merely for ritual, but for spiritual formation. They teach that holiness flows from God, joy is rooted in obedience, and worship is inseparable from daily life. They remind us to begin with God our days, our work, our harvest, and our lives, all first dedicated to Him. And as we celebrate these feasts in their proper seasons, we glimpse the ultimate promise, the eternal feast in the presence of God, a joyful assembly never-ending, where sorrow is gone and His people dwell in everlasting communion. So let us remember, the feasts of the Lord are not burdensome rules. They are divine invitations. Invitations to rest, to rejoice, to give thanks, to offer our first fruits, to repent, and to dwell in His presence. They are reminders that every season, every moment can be sacred if we lift it to God. And as we meditate on these holy times, let us hear the still, small voice of God calling us into His rhythm, into His feast, and into His eternal joy. In the shadow of Sinai, as the children of Israel trembled at the feet of the Almighty, the law found its solemn culmination. Every command, every ordinance, every statute that had guided them through the wilderness was now gathered into one final, sweeping call that set before them the paths of life and death, blessing and curse, obedience and rebellion. This is the chapter where heaven and earth bear witness. God promises, God warns, and yet God holds the door of mercy wide open for those who will return The Lord begins with a charge of eternal weight. You shall make no idols, nor graven images. You shall keep my Sabbaths and revere my sanctuary. I am the Lord your God. These two pillars, the rejection of false gods and the devotion to holy worships, stand as the test of true obedience. For nothing so provokes the heart of God as idolatry, and nothing so upholds his truth as a people sanctified by reverence. To bow before a carved stone is to confine the infinite, to reduce the Almighty to a shadow. To keep the sanctuary holy is to acknowledge the majesty of his presence among his people. And then, with a voice both tender and mighty, he promises blessings beyond measure. Walk in my statutes, keep my commandments, and the land shall yield its increase. Rain will fall in its season. The earth will produce abundantly, and your labor will overflow with harvest. The plowman shall overtake the reaper. The barns shall be filled to overflowing, and the poor shall share in your bounty. There shall be peace within your borders, and no foe shall terrify you. Even a handful shall conquer 100. 100 shall rout 10,000. I will multiply your seed. I will bless your people, and I will set my tabernacle among you. I will walk with you. I will be your God, and you shall be my people. Remember, I have redeemed you from the yoke of Egypt, that you might walk upright and free. Yet, the blessings of God are never empty of choice, and the shadow of disobedience looms dark and terrible. But if you will not hearken to me, if you despise my statutes and break my covenant, then comes the terror. Disease shall consume your eyes and sadden your hearts. Your seed shall be devoured by enemies. Famine and drought shall strike your fields. The sword shall prevail against you, and the pride of your power shall crumble. Beasts shall roam unchallenged, and your cities shall lie waste. You shall eat the flesh of your children in desperation. Your sanctuaries shall be desolate, your land uninhabited, and the Sabbath of the land, long neglected, shall at last find rest without you. All the instruments of life, the gifts of God, shall turn against you, and the very creation shall rise in judgment. For God himself will walk contrary to those who persist in rebellion. Understand, these are not idle threats. They are the justice of a holy God, the righteous consequence of obstinacy and pride. To despise his law is to despise him. To reject his corrections is to invite calamity. The rod of discipline is meant to guide and reform, but if you harden your heart, then the rod becomes a hammer, and judgment follows unrelenting. God's fury, patient at first, will increase sevenfold again and again, until the rebellious see the full weight of their folly. The soul that turns from God finds itself abandoned. The mind, terrorized, the heart pining away in iniquity. And yet even here mercy waits. For the Lord is never content with the destruction of his own. If the people confess their iniquity, the sins of their fathers and their own rebellion, if they acknowledge his just hand in all their punishment, if their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and submission blooms in the soil of their sorrow, then the story turns. Then God remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then the land shall be restored. The Sabbaths shall be observed. Mercy shall flow once more into a repentant people. Even in exile, even amid punishment, God will not cast away his own, nor break the covenant he swore to their ancestors. Behold, the majesty of the covenant, blessings promised to the obedient, judgments unleashed on the obstinate, yet always a path of return, a door open for the penitent. The Almighty, sovereign over heaven and earth, invites his people to life, to abundance, to peace, to communion. And still, with unmatched patience, he waits for the humble heart, the contrite spirit, the one who will turn from sin and accept his justice, that they may once again walk with him, upright and redeemed. This is the final charge of the law at Sinai, the promise of life, the reality of judgment, and the unyielding hope of mercy. Listen, O Israel, and all who hear, for the God who redeemed you calls through covenant, through commandment, through mercy itself, to walk in his ways, and find the fullness of blessing that comes from obedience, faith, and humble return to him. The final words of the law might seem to close the statute book, yet they open a profound doorway into God's heart, a window into his desire for the devotion of his people. Beyond the commands that bound Israel, beyond the sacrifices already prescribed, there lay the realm of the voluntary, the singular, the extraordinary acts of devotion. These were not demanded, yet God welcomed them, for he measures not only our obedience, but the love, zeal, and sincerity of our hearts. The Lord instructed Moses, when a man consecrates himself, his children or his possessions, they are the Lord's. Each life, each gift is valued not randomly, but with divine wisdom. The strongest in their prime are honored for their service. The young and the old, though less capable, are still precious. The poor are considered according to their ability. God does not demand what we cannot give. He measures devotion not by wealth or strength, but by the heart that offers freely, deliberately, and faithfully. Animals, too, may be vowed. The clean beasts fit for sacrifice are holy and cannot be exchanged. To alter them would profane the sacred. Even unclean beasts, which could be redeemed at a fifth more than their valuation, carry a weighty lesson. Inconsistency in devotion has a cost. God desires steadfast hearts, not rash promises that wither at the first trial. What of our homes, our lands? God allows His people to sanctify them, to dedicate them to Him. The priest values these consecrated things. Redemption comes at a price, a fifth added, to impress upon the heart the seriousness of devotion. Fields inherited from one's fathers may be partially consecrated and redeemed, respecting the family legacy. Purchased land, while consecrated, is valued until the year of Jubilee, ensuring that even devotion to God does not violate justice or neighborly rights. Every firstling of beasts is the Lord's. It cannot be vowed, bought, or sold. Devoted things, utterly set apart, are holy beyond redemption. In these laws, God teaches that true devotion is costly, permanent, and above all, reverent. The Lord commanded tithes, 1/10 of grain, fruit, and herd. Tithing is no mere ritual. It is a declaration. All I have, all I am, comes from you, O Lord. Should anyone seek to redeem the tithe, a fifth must be added, a reminder that curiosity or wavering hearts cannot diminish God's claim. What passes under the rod, marked by His providence, is holy, and we, as stewards, are called to honor Him with it, supporting His ministers and sustaining His work. Though these commands were given to Israel under the shadow of Sinai, their significance transcends time. They teach us about zeal, consistency, reverence, and generosity. In Christ, we are not bound by ceremonial cleanness, tithes, or sacrifices. Yet, the heart of the law, faithful devotion, reverent worship, and generous giving remains eternal. No longer must we fear the fire of the altar or the weight of the law, for Christ is our mediator, our priest, our sacrifice. Yet we are called to a higher devotion, a freedom that inspires boldness, sincerity, and joy in service. Our homes, our lands, our work, our very lives can be offered not reluctantly, but with hearts afire, eager to honor the God who has given us life, breath, and abundance. What does this mean for us, centuries removed from Sinai? It means our service must be intentional, our giving sincere, and our hearts engaged. Ordinary things, time, treasures, can become holy if offered with love. Singular acts of devotion are not forgotten by God. They echo in eternity. Let our offerings, large or small, be acts of worship. Let our zeal be constant, our hearts unshakable. Blessed be God, for in Christ we approach the holiest place with confidence, joy, and true freedom, saying always, Lord, all that I am and all that I have is yours.